Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be taking a look at Knight Swain. So Knight, he's been playing a lot of Swain, been winning a lot of games, but after the Swain nerfs came through, I wasn't sure if he was going to keep playing it. But looking at the Swain nerfs, his win rate, it did drop from 53 to 51, but remains very, very strong as a champion. So not, S plus tier like he was before, but still very, very strong. So the build that Knight's been going with recently, he's been going Imperial Mandate. I'll just get the build up for you guys. Imperial Mandate, Rylai's, and then Zhonya's normally. He's built a lot of different things. He's also experimented with Liandry's and Everfrost. So if I'm honest, I don't know what the best is right now. But I think the Imperial Mandate build definitely has a lot of potential. I did play a couple games of it on stream and it did feel quite good. So let's take a look at one of the games and see how it goes. So this game is actually Knight Swain against Z99Z. So pretty fierce matchup. I think Swain in general is pretty good against assassins and shorter range champs. He can struggle against some of the longer range champions. Kind of depends how they deal with him in team fights and also what kind of laning phase they have. I think Swain in general doesn't have the best laning phase, so if you can kind of get free scaling, it's pretty nice. But normally, unless you're against a champion that's very known for bullying lane, champions like Cassio, Syndra, kind of anti-mage champions, like Victor, Azir, etc. I think for the most part, Swain can neutralize basically any lane. And against assassins, that's exactly what you want. So in the early game here, going to be bullying Zed off the wave a lot at level 1. Zed's very weak at level 1, and even though Swain is not the strongest champ, can still pressure a little bit. As you can see though, it doesn't really convert to a big health advantage or anything like that. Now it's taken the bone plating, so I think this is a very, very smart choice. It could be tempting, I'll just bring up the runes. It could be tempting to go for the mega scaling, what's it called, overgrowth and conditioning, but I think it's sort of greedy. And bone plating is very, very good against assassins that don't have an easy way to proc it. So for Zed to proc your bone plating, he's just going to have to hit a random Q on you, or he's just going to have to commit his whole combo, his WEQ. And obviously, if you can eat Zed's combo with bone plating, it's very, very worth it. Let me put it on his vision so we can see what he sees. I think one thing that's really underrated about Swain is that you can use your W for vision on camps early if you don't know where the jungler is. Obviously, it's actually a pretty nice trading tool. If you hit your E on someone, you can easily W them after and do quite a bit of damage. But also, if you don't find a use for it, you can check camps with it, although it is somewhat costly mana-wise. So it's not something you should just spam on cooldown or anything like that, unlike Ashe E, for example. So at the moment, doing pretty well for himself, just doing some farming. Does have this top ward to hug to. Lily's going to have a look, but I don't think Lilia and Zed really have much gank threat onto Swain. If this is a stronger kind of ganking combo, it could be problematic, but Zed Lilia, 0 CC. They do have some damage, but it's sort of hard for them to actually get on Swain. So at the moment, it's going pretty well. The wave's coming to him, and he hasn't really taken any damage or any meaningful damage. In matchups like this, when you have TP and your opponent has Ignite, as long as you can TP back before you get all in, you're never really in any danger. Obviously, if you get to the point where you can be all in, you see trading very aggressively with the bone plating here. This is how you want to look to use this. There's two ways to use bone plating. It's you can either play extremely aggressively when you have it up because there's nothing your opponent can do to trade into it, or you can use it to kind of bait out the enemy's abilities. But it's generally not that good to just be keeping your bone plating up. I guess if you mega outscale your opponent, you can look for that, but I like to use bone plating somewhat proactively. So Zed gets executed, better than dying to Wukong, obviously. Swain can kind of keep this wave here for a while. There's not really any kind of... there's a couple of things. So you could push this, but then you probably have to TP back afterwards, whereas if you keep it here, it'll slow push, and then you can probably crash it and save TP. It'll also deny Zed a couple of extra creeps. Yeah, so what he's doing here, has kept the wave in a very favorable spot, and it's going to base TP back to the lane. So this is really, really good. Probably the most optimal thing you can do. What is he going to pick up on the first base? Okay, so actually, what is this item even called, by the way? Bandle Glass Mirror. I've never known what that item is called, but grabs that. That's actually a pretty decent first item. It does have quite a few stats on it, and Swain can use them all quite well. So it does look weird to see a mid lane champion buying that, but I actually think Swain is with this Imperial Mandate build, is actually pretty good. I think when you're choosing between the Mythics, I still haven't really decided if one's just better overall than the others, but I think that Mandate's very strong for the 2v2, and I think if they have a lot of tanks, you can definitely consider Liandry's. But I'm not sure I'd consider Everfrost. I feel like it's mainly between Mandate and Liandry's at the moment. I think the Everfrost mana kind of unnecessary, and also the Everfrost active is not super necessary on Swain because you already have like the ability to lock them in place, right, and hit your W, so not really super important. Now it's actually gone the sweeper, which I think is very interesting. I think the reason he's done it is because he doesn't think there's any gank threat from the enemy team, like from this Lilia Zed. I'm not sure I would have gone for this personally, so I'm actually pretty curious to see how it kind of works out, because I think that is pretty greedy to try and play this lane without it, but you know, let's see how it goes. Maybe he will kind of like generate some pressure with it. Now, you've also seen that he's gone for the spellbook, so he's doing this pretty much every game. I think Swain doesn't really have a good Keystone, honestly. A lot of people have been routing Conqueror, but it's actually very hard to stack Conqueror on this champ in the early game. So you're pretty much playing the first 20 minutes without a Keystone, and I think that's really bad. You know, the early game is very, very important, as is every phase of the game, really. But I think, like, Conqueror, it just doesn't really do enough for you for too long in the game. Other options you consider, like, Phase Rush, which I actually think is pretty decent, and the blue tree is nice. But again, it's not really super good on Swain. Like, it's an option, but it's not something where, you know, there's some Keystones on champs where it's like, okay, this Keystone is so good on the champion, there's literally there's like no other option because it's just so good. And Swain's not really like that. He doesn't have a dominant Keystone. The spellbook often ends up being a kind of keystone for champions that don't really have a keystone that they particularly synergize with. The reason is that having all the extra sums is quite useful, especially if you're a short range champion, because like playing every fight with an extra like ghost, barrier, heal, or exhaust, it adds up. You know, it's a lot of extra combat stats for fighting, and also the inspiration tree is pretty nice, of course. It pushes us in. Zed got a free kill on Gangplank top, and also Lilia got a kill on the Wukong jungle, so it's going to be hard for him to pressure here. Most likely going to have to play safe, but actually going to contest, and probably going to have to flash. Okay, pops the barrier. Dies. Okay, it was pretty greedy what he did there. I respect it. It was very alpha, but trying to contest when your jungler is dead, obviously not the best. Also greeted his flash, so not ideal. Lilia has 4 kills. Zed roams bot. There's definitely no chance Swain can counter gank the bot thing here since the play is already over. So just going to look to push mid. This is very, very good. Actually going to get quite a bit of gold for doing this. So he gets the 160 from the turret plate. Zed is actually going to lose quite a lot of gold here. There's like a big wave stacked up. So the roam doesn't even end up being very good for Zed. Like he gets an assist, but does lose a giant wave and a tower plate. So it's probably slightly in Swain's favor, actually. Let's actually check the gold. Swain is very slightly behind, but honestly pretty good given how the game went so far. Also notice, putting points in W second, after the rework, W second is much better than E second. I actually can't remember what Swain used to max most recently, but I remember there was definitely a point where you maxed E second, and that is not the case anymore. I did not play Swain, honestly, in a very long time. I played Swain in 2018, I think it was. When Swain was quite OP, I think it was 2018. And then after that, I pretty much didn't play him until now when it was reworked, where I played 2 games recently on stream. And it does feel quite good. I think it's like a champion that can always get like a lot of consistent value. Unless you're against a comp that has a lot of range, it's pretty easy for you to have a lot of impact. You know, you can always be like AoEing in the team fight. You do bring some sort of CC and scaling to the team, as well as like strong side laning. So there's like a lot of good things Swain can bring. Now, I guess this Imperial mandate quite early, which is pretty nice. TB is back to the lane. Definitely stronger than Zed at the moment, has a level advantage, although it doesn't have a defensive stun, which is perhaps the only thing he needs to be careful of. But in a lot of these matchups, you know, it's like Zed is a burst champion and Swain is a DPS champion, so if you do get tankier, kind of like Swain is, got the cloth armor, got a lot of HP, if Zed can't like 100 to 0 you, then he doesn't really have any threat on you. You know, he's not really going to poke you down. I guess he can if he gets a few WEQ combos, but again, like this bone plating deters this combo quite a lot. It's actually very, very useful. I will be talking about bone plating in a video, actually. It's a very underrated rune. As you can see, Zed goes in, but doesn't really have the damage to finish Swain off, especially not with this combat stun. And now Zed is pretty low, so this is like pretty bad, honestly, for Zed. So if you're ever in a situation as an assassin where you use all your resources, like your ult and your ignite, it basically has to be a kill, otherwise you fall very far behind, because it's like, as an assassin, you have limited windows in which to get kills, but you can almost always get kills on those windows. So if you mess up those windows, you know, if you miss a kill, it's very, very problematic. And it leaves you with like a long period of downtime where you can't really snowball yourself anymore. So Knight obviously knows this, realizes that Zed has pretty much no threat, can just push him on the tower, and looks like Wukong can probably chase him down. I'm actually not sure if he's going to catch him, but obviously forces him off the wave. Swain can continue to push. And actually, this is a very threatening comp, by the way. Yuumi with Swain Wukong. It's like any one of these champs, or any one of those two champs that gets buffed by Yuumi is just going to have an absolute field day on the Rift. So even though it hasn't really had like a lot of impact on the game so far, is like massively far ahead of Zed. Only 400 or 300 gold up, but in terms of like power at this stage of the game, it's very much in Swain's favor. If there's a fight right now, Swain will heavily outperform the Zed. So yeah, that's like pretty nice, right? Like I'm not sure. I think Swain is probably blind pickable, but I think he definitely functions better as a counter pick. Or actually, I don't even know if that's true. I feel like it's just there are better blinds than Swain, but he is still pretty blindable. You know, he is a strong champ. While he does have like sort of weaknesses in the laning phase, for the most part, his lanes are neutralizable, and it's not often that you're going to get countered with an extremely hard like range comp in solo queue. It just doesn't happen that often. So they're going to go on Swain here. I actually think Swain can live this for a pretty long time. Guess the Flash team is going to come and clean up, it looks like. Yeah. I think another thing that's like a little underrated about bone plating is that it actually does often get you value in team fights. You know, I think that's something people don't think about, is because they think mainly of bone plating as like a laning rune compared to, say, conditioning overgrowth as like a team fighting rune. And I think that is somewhat true, right? Like it's definitely true. The conditioning overgrowth scales better, but it's not like bone plating just immediately disappears. It still can get you quite a lot of impact in these team fights. So pushing the wave a little bit further, the enemy team is dead, so there's not really anything to kind of be scared of here. And if you look at his vision, like fantastic bot side vision, has basically complete control. Actually not going to get this tower, which is pretty frustrating, but can just base most likely. Or actually might stay on the map here, we'll see. Yeah, decides to stay. So you could base here. It's interesting because like this is actually a hard choice sort of, because you've got 1350 gold and not a ton of mana, so you could definitely base and it would be good. But also if you base, give up 6 creeps for free, seems kind of not good. Would probably be better to just like wait, stay on the map until you have this TP. Actually gonna go for the 1v1. Has Ignite and Ghost. Is that what happened? What did oh no, he got ignited by Vlad. Just keeps on sticking on him. Dude, Swain ult just staying permanently on is the funniest thing ever. Actually stays on forever as long as you can keep one target near you. So as you can see, this is going to end up with a much more favorable base timing. It's going to base now. Could maybe greed for more, but it doesn't see Zed. Yeah, okay, so it turned out Zed was bot. If he had greeded for more, probably would have died, but in a very, very good spot now. Got these 2 core items. If you can get these items early in the game, it's very, very good, because both these items, they're very cheap. So compared to other people, like hitting their 2 item spike, unless you fall behind, you're just going to hit your 2 item spike earlier than them, and you can like look to fight around that a lot, right? Obviously, the enemy team is like pretty significantly behind, so it's not like they're really going to hit their 2 items like anytime soon anyway. But if you're in an even game, okay, sorry, I could not speak there. If you're in an even game, hitting your 2 item spike like quite a bit earlier, actually, you know, it actually means quite a bit. It can mean that like you get to contest the dragon where your opponents don't have 2 items and you do. And for a champion like Swain, where these items synergize with him so well, it's like not just are you hitting kind of like, you know, your 2 items, it's like you're hitting these 2 core items that are absolutely crucial to your champ. You know, if you compare this to, say, let's say a champion like Azir, who has to spend like a ton of gold to get his core items, you know, stuff like expensive Mythic, like Luden's Liandry's, and then also like Nash's, I think is like 3k gold, right? And then after that, probably going for Rabadon's, very expensive build. And even though these items like synergize quite well, they don't really pick up until you get the 3 items. You know, it's definitely like more of a heavy hitting scaling build, but Swain, for these very cheap items, gets a massive power spike and can really look to leverage that kind of over the enemy team. Pops the ult early. This is something you can definitely do now. Because the ult lasts forever, you don't need to try and like greed it for the perfect time. You can actually pop it quite early, as well as your actual ult active. I think it's called Demon Flare. Just popping it early to get the slow and keep people like within your range, it's quite good. Obviously, once you get the Rylai's, it is significantly easier, but before that, you know, using that R active is actually quite important. Otherwise, people are going to get out of your range. Can become sort of difficult. Swain actually has like a reasonable amount of poke if you can hit your W's and E's, which admittedly is quite difficult. But so far, I think actually every W has hit, and that E would have hit if not flash. So very nice skill shots. And actually that is like one underrated thing about Swain is that your W, there is like definitely a lot of skill to it. You know, you can place your W in a way that does make it quite difficult to dodge. And your W, especially because you're maxing it second, is very, very important. It does quite a lot of extra damage. So it actually has ult here in 5 seconds. If it can delay for this, will easily win this team fight. Actually, looks like they're going to easily win it anyway. Has the Yuumi. Might flash ult in. What are we thinking? Yeah, goes for the flash E, pops ult. If they can't, like, I've seen this so many times now. If you can't burst Swain, the amount of impact he has on the fight is just ridiculous. Like, look at this. Dude, if you don't have Grievous Wounds versus Swain, you might as well not even try, because it's just so hard to kill the champ, especially with the Yuumi on him. Honestly, I think it's really, really good. As you saw, after the nerfs, 51% win rate for a relatively simple champion. Like, I don't know. He's not simple conceptually, but certainly simple mechanically. It's a very, very good spot for a solo queue champ to be in. So guys, that's going to be it for this video. I think like one thing you guys can definitely take away from this video is the importance of item spikes, especially on a champion like Swain, and how that can kind of impact the fights you take. You know, if you are playing a champion that has these like very cheap items and can hit these spikes significantly faster than your opponent, it makes a very, very big difference. And especially if you're a mid-game champion like Swain, you know, you hit your 2 core, you're kind of like at a really strong point of the game, no one has healing cut yet to deal with you. This is like your pretty much like best possible scenario. You can just look to fight over and over, fight every objective, fight every skirmish, and it'll look really good for you. So if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.